how are you doing, everyone? This is Gregg Marsh here from Synergize Weight Loss Centre in Bellarmine, and I'm just going to have a little chat with you. Just something that came up in the news last week. So basically, last Thursday, in the USA Today and in the BBC News, they reported that the American Heart Association has issued a presidential advisory, and what they're advising is that basically the American public should avoid coconut oil because it's a saturated fat and it's unhealthy, and it's as unhealthy as butter and lard. So I just want to kind of come up with the facts a little bit more and go through my opinion. It is my personal opinion, and I do believe that we can come up with some interesting facts and try and debate the subject. Okay, so the first thing is coconut oil is a saturated fat. There's no question about that. It has 8 to 9% saturated fats, and the rest of it is made up of monounsaturated and polyunsaturated, which for years have been basically advertised as being the healthy ones. So if you just went off this alone, you would look at this and say, right, it only has 11% of healthy fats and 8 to 9% of unhealthy fats. However, let's go into this in a little bit more detail. The saturated fats are made up of what's called MCTs, or medium chain triglycerides. Okay, and these medium chain triglycerides are not absorbed in the same way as the other fats, like the long chain triglycerides in the body. They actually bypass the system, they go directly into the liver, and they're used for energy directly at source. So what it means is that you could use MCTs in your diet, and in theory you wouldn't gain any body fat at all because your body's using it for energy constantly. Whereas with long chain fatty acids, your body actually has to kind of go through a whole system, through the gallbladder and bile, and break it down, and sometimes they are stored quite quickly. All right. Just to make one point though, that there is one particular medium chain triglyceride that is in coconut oil, okay, and it's known as caprylic acid, and that is the actual active ingredient for weight loss. So if you're looking for weight loss, that's the one that we were more interested in, all right? And there is 7% of it in coconut oil. So while it's not fully in coconut oil as a whole, it is in there, and it's important to bear that in mind. Now let's have a look at butter. So butter is 51% saturated fat. Lard is 32. So if you look at this, and for years, basically we have been told that you must avoid saturated fats at all costs. So butter is bad for you, hence why the margarine industry and the spreads industry has basically grown and grown massively into a billion dollar, billion euro industry since the late 1970s. And basically lard now is in non-existence. You don't see it anywhere. My mum used to cook with lard when I was a kid for every week, and I'm still here, So let's go through this in a bit more of the research itself. So what this report has said, or this advisory committee has said, that they basically reviewed 7, I don't know if you can see it, they actually reviewed 7 research papers. And of those 7 research papers, it showed that coconut oil will raise what's called LDL cholesterol, or also known as your bad cholesterol, okay, and will reduce your good cholesterol, your HDL cholesterol. So basically leading to heart disease. So heart disease, high cholesterol, okay, and blocked up arteries, and you have to go into meds. Okay, now, I actually this morning went on to PubMed, which is the world's research site where all the papers are published, and I actually found 13 studies that prove that coconut oil raises good cholesterol and lowers bad cholesterol. So, in the true sense of the word, if you go onto any research site, you can find one study that proves you're wrong, one study proves you're right, and one has no opinion. So, as far as I'm concerned, I forget those, all right? Now, let's go a little bit wider scale. In Sweden in 2013, they actually became the first Western country to adopt a reverse of action and to adopt a low-carb, high-fat guidelines instead of a low-fat and high-carb guidelines. So the Swedish Council of Health Technology actually reviewed 16,000 studies. So not 7, but 16,000 studies. And they basically reviewed these studies, and they managed now to persuade the Swedish government to change its policy on dietary guidelines, and Sweden now has rejected the low-fat dogma and has adopted the low-carb and high-fat dogma. And that's been for the last, 3-4 years? And it's interesting to note that Sweden has a 14% obesity rate, whereas the United States has a 33% obesity rate. Go figure. Okay, here's an interesting fact. Our ancestors actually were fed on a high-fat diet for thousands of years. So before the low-fat diet, which came around in the late 1970s, and here's an interesting correlation. In the early 70s, there was actually quite a high number of American senators that actually died of heart disease and heart attacks, and this led to a senator called Senator McGovern, who actually led the charge, along with a research scientist called Ansel Keys, and they led the charge to actually adopt a low-fat, high-carb approach to dietary guidelines. Now, there was a bit of fighting, debating and discussion, and eventually they got it through, and that has been the case in America since, 1976, I think, when the debate was on, and then the rest of the world has adopted the same guidelines. Now, obesity rates, higher, cancer rates, higher, diabetes, what else have we got? Practically every disease has grown since the late 1970s. I'm not saying it's true, I'm not saying it's directly because of that, however, it's just interesting to know, isn't it, that as soon as they changed the dietary plan, all diseases basically increased, okay? So, there is a couple of other flaws I'd like to bring up as well, alright? So I've basically been using saturated fats for a number of years. I personally take about 100 grams of saturated fats every single day. I use coconut oil, I use butter, I use medium chain triglycerides, I use full fat organic cream, I use full fat Greek yogurt and full fat cream fresh. And guys, it's a very high fat diet, and it's all my favorite foods. Okay, and basically I love it. And we teach you here in Synergize that you don't want to avoid your high fats. You want to include them in your diet, And basically we take people through a weight loss program, and wherever their starting point is and over the journey as they lose weight, we manipulate their macronutrients, we manipulate their proteins, the fats and the carbs, but we always say every single time, keep your saturated fats in as much as possible and ditch the low fat. Okay guys, so my name is Gregg Marsh from Synergize Weight Loss Centre Bellarmine. That's my 2 buttons on saturated fats, and hopefully now this will, give you a bit of food for thought, as they say. Okay, and I'll see you next time. Have a good day and enjoy your lunch wherever you are.